See, we publish a new book every 17 minutes.
Like a different book, or you mean a copy?
Different, not a copy, different title, right? So every year we publish about 30,000, 35,000 books. People who are passionate about that particular topic, it's faster to market, right? So as soon as, by the time you realize there is a trend, already there are so many books out there that are self-published. See, it's because we're building the haystack and then we are finding the needles based on data, right? It's a very different approach. So we give people the access and they go and innovate. It's not us, right? So, and every year we turn the dial up on democratization a little bit. So we have this in our head where how democratized are we, right? Are we truly offering authors away, or are we a gatekeeper ourselves? So these are all existential questions that we keep asking.
Welcome to the Book People. I'm Aishwarya Javalgekar, a writer, book editor, podcast producer, and the head of originals at Bound. In this path-breaking podcast, I demystify the publishing and creative industries and uncover the biggest opportunities and challenges for writers in India today. Everyone has an opinion on self-publishing today. There are people who think self-publishing is this amazing thing that has democratized publishing, made it accessible, and is letting anyone who wants to publish a book become an author. On the other hand, we also have a lot of people who say that, self-published books are badly written, have poor quality, or that readers have a really hard time finding good self-published books or being able to identify which book would be good amongst all the self-published books that exist in India today or even globally. So to respond to all of these different opinions and ideas on self-publishing and to get a deep dive into the reality of it, I am talking to Naveen Valsakumar. So Naveen is an engineer at heart, and he actually started Notion Press in 2012 with two co-founders. Today, Notion Press is the biggest self-publishing platform in India, and they have published over 55,000 books. So I'm going to find out with Naveen exactly what the self-publishing process includes from start to end. We're going to discuss, can self-publishing actually be a better option for writers or for people who want to write books than traditional publishing? And finally, we're going to find out some exciting new things that Notion Press is currently working on in order to make publishing even more accessible for writers in India today. So let's dive in. Hi Naveen, welcome to the Book People.
Hi, Aishwarya, thanks for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad to have you because honestly, self-publishing is something that everyone is curious about. And even when we do our classes or when I'm talking to writers, one of the major questions they have is this sort of traditional publishing versus self-publishing. What is the route to go? And so I'm so happy to have you here to just have this very honest breakdown of exactly what self-publishing is and what happens behind the scenes. So super happy to have you here. And the first question I have for you is, so obviously you are the, co-founder and CEO of Notion Press, but I also saw that you were an engineer earlier, right? Like you have a background in engineering and then you started this. So what led you to starting Notion Press in the first place? And how did you get into books and publishing?
Yeah, so very interesting question, right? So because I think it's very common if you look at publishing or people in publishing to see this. You can't find this anywhere else, right? So I started out as an aerospace engineer.
Yeah.
Always had a passion for books, and then moved into cybersecurity. I worked with one of the largest cybersecurity companies in the world, and I don't know, somewhere along the line, I felt that my calling is still with books. And also because I saw a clear problem that could be solved for a lot of people. And like everybody else, I guess I stumbled into books.
Okay. Yeah, actually, that's very common. You're right. I had interviewed in last season, I had interviewed Disha Nayak, who again was in finance and then she moved to books. like move to publishing. We see a lot of these stories of people who are always passionate about books and then move. But with your story, I'm just so curious because aerospace engineering is something, when I was young and like I had friends who were doing engineering, that was the ultimate thing, right? Even within engineering, they were like, oh my God, I want to do aerospace. The fact that you moved from that to books, I find very fascinating. But do you think that, your background in engineering, in cybersecurity, adds some perspective to the publishing industry that is different, or that people who have just had the very direct formal road to publishing might not have?
See, I think we still think like engineers, right? And it's like hammer and nails. For us, everything looks like a problem that can be solved with some technology, right? So, see, I think that's the perspective. And one of the most difficult things for us as engineers in publishing is how to not dilute the arts part of it, right? So it's great you're using technology, but how to make sure that the art side of publishing, which is the more beautiful side, right? How you do not dilute that process.
So how do you not dilute that process? What is the secret?
We have teams here who hold us accountable, right? So see, we have our team is about 60% are creatives, right, and 40% are engineers. So a lot of decisions are made together, keeping in mind are we going to, for example, now there's a lot of talk about generative AI, right? And there are engineers who are saying, hey, can we just do books ourselves, right?
Yeah.
It's that on one extreme. On the other extreme, there are arts people who have been working with us for a while. So they also think like they are savvy with technology. So they are thinking about how do we help writers increase productivity? How does a writer become more productive? What are the challenges that we can solve, right? So this and bringing this synergy is what I think we are very good at.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest currently the chat GPT question, right? Which is it replacing writers, or is it helping writers cut out some of the work that they have to do, or write faster or write better? I think is the question that everyone is still sort of trying to answer right now.
No, I think that's the question we have been answering for the last few months, right?
Yeah.
But so not generally ChatGPT, but we are also looking at the technology that powers ChatGPT. And I don't think it will replace anybody, right? Maybe very mundane roles that would have already been replaced or would definitely be replaced can be replaced through ChatGPT or
that
GPT.
Are replaceable in a way, right?
Yeah, but I don't think creative processes work like that. So see, we have tried a lot of different approaches, right? But everywhere we go, the road leads to helping writers be more productive. How do you avoid writer's block? How can this technology help somebody write better? I have a great story. I have a vision for a great story, but how do I write it well?
Yeah.
Right. So all roads lead to that.
So you mentioned that when you started Notion Press, you had this clear idea of here is a problem that I've identified, and now I'm going to go about solving it. So going back to, when you started Notion Press in 2012, I think, what was that problem that you identified, and what did you think was the solution, and has that changed over time?
I think this calls for a long answer, right? So, so see, I first started exploring publishing because I wanted to publish a book, right? So after a lot of rejections, I couldn't figure out what I was missing. So I spoke to a friend in publishing. I told him, boss, this is the book. What do you think? And he gave me the nuanced approach. He gave me the different layers of how the business of publishing works, right? Somehow I was not fully convinced because I felt publishing was still operating under constraints of the 20th century. And so many things have changed since then. So I'll give you examples, right? So I feel there are 4 modes that a publisher has, like a large publisher, leave alone curation. But other than that, if you think of a publisher as a service provider, right? So there are 4 primary modes. One is access to creative talent, right? And the expertise that comes with that. See, in today you could go online and find really good designers and editors to work with you, right? Second is mass production. Basically, a publisher would invest in a lot of copies, right? That can be replaced by print on demand. And the prices are constantly dropping for print on demand to the extent where today for Notion Press, it's cheaper to print on demand than to print in offset at our scale, right? So see, scale gives very different perspectives on problems, right? So the third is a physical supply chain network. That was one of the moats for a publisher. They could push your book into all the bookstores. But as sales started shifting online to e-commerce, that moat started getting diluted, right? And the fourth is you needed to do expensive mass marketing to push a book, which got diluted by social media, or it got improved by social media, where you could target a specific niche, right? So the question that we started with was, if every mode has been democratized by technology, then why should publishing still be kept behind gatekeepers? The rules were formed many years ago because all these large publishers are 100 years, 175 years old. And most of how they operate were formed many, many years ago. And somebody forgot to keep up with times. You start operating in a certain way, and then you're as a large organization, it's difficult for you to adapt, right? And the interesting observation from that is there has not been a lot of disruptions in terms of business model or any other innovation that's come from within the industry, right? As in people within the industry. In my opinion, the last great disruption where it democratized access was mass market paperbacks. That was in 1930, right? So after that, you have DTP, you have ebooks, you have digital platforms. All of these have come from outside. You have audio, right? So for some reason, large publishers have not been able to be at the forefront of this change, or they are not incentivized to change. I think that's where an alternate system helps more people, where if we can do this without the rights grab, if we can do this without having to wait for 18 months or 6 weeks for a reply, if we can do all of this really well and use technology to solve these problems, then I think we have a good business. So that is the thesis with which we started. And every year we turn the dial up on democratization a little bit. So we have this in our head where, how democratized are we, right? Are we truly offering authors away, or are we a gatekeeper ourselves? So these are all existential questions that we keep asking.
But that's a great question to kind of, keep asking yourself, because that's the only way you're constantly thinking about, what do I need to change? How do I need to adapt? Do I need to do something different? Because I think otherwise, again, you sort of get stuck in that same stagnation of, the current system is working, so why change it or why adapt? So I think that's a great sort of existential question to have.
I think it comes with this tinkering engineer attitude, right? So even if it's working, keep tinkering.
Take things apart and then put them back together and see how they can work better.
We've done it so many times.
So if we look at how Notion Press works currently, right? Like, what is the self-publishing process as a whole to sort of understand that? For example, if I have a manuscript, right, that's finished or almost complete, and I come to Notion Press saying, okay, I have a manuscript now. How do I, get this published? I want to put it out in the world. What is kind of the process that I have to go through as a writer?
So now I think that is slightly evolved, right? So now we have different segments of writers, ranging from student, hobby writer, to somebody who's a CEO of a very large organization trying to build their brand using the book, right? So the use cases have evolved. So now we have different programs for different people. So you could, if you're a writer, you could go on the Notion Press platform, you could design your book yourself using the tools available, and you could publish it for free. About 90% of our books get published that way. It's a fairly new platform. It's only about 2.5 years old.
So when you say design the book, I'm just trying to understand. So does that mean if I have a finished manuscript, basically the typesetting part, which is how the text will look in the book, and the cover?
Correct. So you could either upload a designed book that you have typeset in elsewhere, or you could come in and use our tools to design the book. So we follow CMS for the design. So the tool will just take in raw content and convert it into a styled book where it will look like a professionally designed book, right?
Oh, nice.
And yeah, so and then we also have another program for people who want a very high quality book, where there is a lot of so we offer editing and design services. But there our approach has evolved now, because I feel it's not just enough to edit and design the book, but we are now taking a very product approach, looking at what this product is, how do you position it in the market, how do you build a marketing plan for the author so that they can see. One thing that's very evident is any form of publishing, traditional self-publishing, whatever it is, it doesn't work without the author's involvement, right?
Yeah.
In promotions, because see, nobody wants to hear from a publisher. A reader wants to connect with an author, right? The product is such that it's probably one of the only products in the world where the person's name goes on it.
Yeah.
Right? You don't pick up an FMCG product and see the name of the scientist who worked on it, right?
Yeah.
So
no, it's very interesting. I've actually come across a lot of people who don't even know publishers or don't know that publishing houses are something that exists. Like when I was going to do my publishing course, I had people who were like, what do you mean a publishing house? Like, what do you do? Because doesn't an author just write a book and then publish the book? Like, why are you even needed? So I think that is so interesting, where books as products, for sure, where a lot of times, unless people are very like avid readers who know different publishers, who know where to look for the publisher's logo and know sort of who has published this, they don't care about the publisher.
I don't think people should care also, right? So
Yeah.
this whole thing is a whether you call it a transaction or an engagement or an interaction between a writer and his reader, right? Everybody else is a facilitator. You don't go and see where something is manufactured, which country, which province. You don't worry about all of that, right? So you consume the product because it's advertised to you, right? Because you are able to resonate with the product or you have a need for it, right? And especially in book, where it's such a personal relationship that you can build between these two parties, I think all of us should just get out of the way and focus on what we do well, which is the supply chain and making sure that we are enabling these creatives.
Yeah. So we spoke about, obviously, in the publishing process, there's the writing, right? Where the writer is writing the book. Then the book gets edited, either by whatever freelance editors or friends, or the author themselves sort of edits, and that's fine. Then you have the typesetting, where the book is put, the writing is put in that book template or format in a sense. You have the cover design. Do you also, because a lot of times, because Bound also sort of works in this editing sort of space, right? Some of the questions we always get is, okay, if I want to book my book out in self-publishing, can you also help me get the ISBN? Can you also help me, print the copies and sort of be involved in that aspect, which is literally like firstly registering the book and then getting the copies and print copies and kind of being able to distribute the book in a sense. So are you also involved in that? I know you're involved in printing, but like the ISBN and things like that.
Everything, right? So we offer end to end. So from and everything is automated. So there's no human being required. So from getting the ISBN for the book to applying it inside the book and pushing the book through supply chain in about today, I think about 100 countries we do. Just as a stat, in the last 2 years, we would have sold about 50 to 60 lakh copies.
That's great. And how do you define sort of the success, because traditional publishers, for example, obviously they keep record of how many sales gotten, and they have this idea of, what is a good sort of book that's doing. I mean, all books are good, but what is a book that's doing really well in terms of sales, and they want to do a reprint, or what is a book that's not doing that well in terms of sales. So for self-publishing authors, how do they kind of measure that, or how should they be able to measure that?
See, I think it's not a one number that fits all, right? So because there are so many different types of books and different reasons why people publish. See, in traditional publishing, the publisher's intention is only one, right? I want to sell more copies, right? But once self-publishing started growing, it started adapting to different use cases. We have writers who use their books as a business card. I have a writer who's gone and who's impressed somebody that he got a 7 crore order. And he wrote to us saying that, hey, my book helped me in this, right?
Yeah.
So there are so many different use cases. So on one side, success is not absolute. It's measured against what the author's objective is. On the other side, we have two ways to identify content that's doing well. One is we have a team that reviews every single book that goes in, right? That's published by Notion Press. They review it, they score it on different metrics. They even score it for, can this be adapted into a Netflix web series? Can this become an audiobook? Okay, does this author have scope for building this book into a course? So there are so many parameters on which our team judges the book, and that's done internally. And that part is not shared with authors. Only for success cases, we reach out and say, hey, I think people would be interested. We are going to reach out for probably movie rights or web series rights.
Okay,
Let's see what
so
happens.
you do that as Notion Press? You reach
Yeah,
out
we do
to
that.
producers for movie rights and look
We
at
have a book to screen program using which we do that.
Okay. What about
Right?
audio?
Audio is something we want to do, and we'll be starting next month. We've done a couple of audio as experiments. For example, we published Prabhu Deva's autobiography as an audiobook, right, in Tamil. We published it last year and it did really well. So now we are taking us. See, one of the biggest challenges with audio is that it's expensive to produce. So you need to have a lot of conviction on whether this can work well in audio. And also audio, you hear the growth numbers, and last year it was 1%, this year it's 2%, and then you say 100% growth. Then in absolute terms, it's not still having that mass adoption, right? So having said that, I think we want to be one of those people who are bringing these tens of thousands of books into audio.
I also asked about audio because obviously Bound is also, doing original podcasts, sort of getting into the audio space. And with audiobooks, obviously we have our, Audible and we have Storytel. But now, for example, Spotify is getting into audiobooks. We're also seeing these bigger platforms getting into audiobooks in a way where maybe for writers and for authors, that's an opportunity to directly be able to sell their book to an Audible, or directly be able to sell their book to a Spotify when Spotify kind of starts doing that in India, which it is not doing yet as of now. That is also an interesting opportunity, because even for authors who are getting traditionally published, one of the things that, an advice that is being given to them, or one of the things that they are also becoming savvy about, is when they sign these contracts with traditional publishers, can they retain audio rights? Can they retain screen rights and then try to sell those rights themselves? Because obviously then that for them, because it's their book, so they will hustle a little more for it. And if they do sell the rights, then obviously they get a larger portion, like they get a lot of return back because it's just them doing it directly. So audio and screen definitely are very interesting.
We're super bullish about audio, right? We just have to get over this hump of how do you produce high quality audio at a fraction of the cost that it costs today, so that you can make it affordable to more people. Since the space is very nascent, you have to curate content and then go put it on these platforms. Otherwise, your engagement numbers will get skewed and you won't learn anything, right?
Yeah. I want to get back to, something you said earlier in terms of there are different reasons that authors publish a book, right? It's not traditional publishing. Obviously, it's sort of like, okay, you want to publish a book, you want people to read it, you want to sort of be out there in the world as an author. Like you said, some people are publishing books to just show credibility, right? To either sort of establish their brand, establish what they do as a service and sort of their professional credibility. A lot of people are turning, if they've done any research, like PhD research or master's research, they're turning that into books to kind of put that forward. Then I think some books also are very good for awareness, right? Like I remember in 2020, there was this book from Notion Press, I think, which was Gopika Kapoor's book Beyond the Blue, which was about autism. And, again, sort of that awareness thing where she's writing the book very clearly to sort of break down autism and create awareness about it in India. So in that sense, where there is obviously with traditional publishing, because, the books that do get published are books that are ultimately chosen by the publisher and the editors as something, that they want to publish, but also something that will guarantee them a certain number of sales numbers, a certain number of sort of like a certain amount. Do you think that what self-publishing is also doing then is allowing for these more diverse topics or these more taboo, I guess, subjects that are not spoken about much in India to also come out more?
Yeah, see, so one of my favorite things to do is to go on the Ocean Press store and search for ridiculously niche topics and see if we have published a book, right? And
what is the most ridiculous niche thing?
No, I'll tell you. So now it's mainstream. So, but many years ago, I remember when blockchain was just getting started, I went and searched for, okay, do we have any blockchain books, right? So we had, I think at that time, about 25 to 30 blockchain books. And I was like, nobody is even on this trend right now. Publishers get on a trend after it's very popular and, right?
Yeah.
So towards the end of the wave, we are already having this content. And I went and saw each of these writers, and I saw that all of them were really good experts in the blockchain field. People who are passionate about that particular topic, it's faster to market, right? So as soon as, by the time you realize there is a trend, already there are so many books out there that are self-published, right?
Yeah.
So now there's a whole ChatGPT books, right? You see how many books are going to be self-published that are written by AI. I think because of the timeline that's required to self-publish, that's shorter. And also these books that don't prescribe to mainstream, they work really well. See, it's because we're building the haystack and then we are finding the needles based on data, right? It's a very different approach. So we give people the access and they go and innovate. It's not us, right? So somebody goes and builds an audience on Instagram, and Instagram is very friendly to poets, right? So it's very visual. It's just few lines and you can build an audience. And I'm going and seeing who this writer is, how did she manage to sell when even mainstream writers are not able to, right? And she's got 500,000 followers on Instagram, right? 500,000 followers, and you can sell easily 10, 15 copies you can sell, right? So see, the exciting thing about self-publishing is you constantly learn from writers on, oh, I didn't know this was possible.
Yeah. But what are you seeing in terms of numbers, because there are self-publishing success stories, obviously, a lot of them. But then what is sort of the ratio of those success stories as compared to, say, authors who are, investing that money in getting the book edited or getting it designed, putting it out there, and then are not able to sell any copies because, in a way, they don't have that sort of just marketing support that maybe a traditional publisher would be able to give in a way?
See, there are two ways to look at this. One, it's a misconception that a traditional publisher will give you marketing support. Right? A traditional publisher takes somebody with enough top of funnel users, which is audience,
to be able
right?
to market themselves.
Correct. So you can have Kareena Kapoor's book, you publish it. Obviously, she's got a lot of influence, right?
Yeah.
And that then drives things. And one observation that I've made over the years is publishers are fast moving more and more towards that trend, right? So, having said that, our approach to marketing is, one, we need the supply chain to be very clean, make sure that our titles are always available at all times, right? So, the first title that we published 11 years ago, that's still available for sale. There is no concept of out of sale, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Once you solve that,
able to do print on demand.
We only do print on demand, and we do a print on demand at a scale that is extremely well executed, right? So, for example, if a book is sold now, in about 45 minutes to 2 hours, it's ready to ship, right? So at that scale, then you're offering next day delivery, Prime, all of this, despite the fact that it's printed on demand, right? So once that is sorted out, which is a hygiene, then you go help people with data of how the book is selling, where is it selling, right? The third problem is of discovery, and discovery follows what I've observed is either the topic is popular or the problem, it's a problem that a lot of people are looking into a book as a solution for, right? So sort of like a painkiller. If otherwise, if you're thinking about it like a vitamin, then it only works if your author is consistent in promoting it. So more often than not, I've found that people who are consistent in terms of promotions are able to sell much better than people who think that I publish it and then I forget it. It's somebody else's problem.
Yeah,
right?
I've done my part. I've written the book. It's out. Now it will sell itself.
You can't blame writers also, because they're putting a lot of energy into this, and by the time they finish writing, they realize that, I mean, they only want the book to be out and they're not thinking about anything else, right? So how we are solving it specifically is we're building a marketing stack, right? So we've integrated with all of the supply chain partners. Now we're building a marketing stack using which we are guiding authors on how to promote at different stages. So what all our learnings from helping authors sell for the past many years, we are now productizing it and bringing it as tools into our platform.
Yeah. Can you give me an example?
I'll give you two examples, right? So what sells fiction content is either somebody resonates with the story, or it's very topical, right? Or the author is known as a storyteller.
Yeah.
Or he's built an audience, right? So now we are looking at, can you help writers publish as they write, gain an audience, build engagement, and then in one click, I can convert it into a book and send it to the supply chain.
Okay.
Right?
Like basically they publish in sections, which I think a lot of digital platforms are looking at that sort of section by section publishing, and then finally
episodic, right? So episodic publishing, right? I think that way what happens is the feedback loop is sorted. Also, you're able to have something that the writer can go out and say, hey, the second chapter is ready, the third chapter is ready. And then eventually that leads to books. So we have done about 400 such books in our experiment stage. Some of them have done really well. So we're very bullish about that for fiction. For non-fiction, I think it requires a lot of thought leadership content on these large social channels. So what we're doing is we're building tools where it picks from their book and tries to write social content in their voice.
Oh, that's very interesting. So, I mean, you have that as a part of the platform where if their book is up.
I think it's going to go live. It's right now rolled out to very few authors who are using it. It's going to go live on the platform maybe end of the quarter, right? So
That's very interesting because I think it's also that repurposing content kind of thing, right? Where you're taking
correct.
those same thoughts, but instead of making that effort repeatedly to sort of put the same thought out in different formats, it's doing that automatically.
And also in not just repurposing the content, but also we are exploring if this can become sort of like a carousel or a video, the presentation format, right? So again, it's a long build, long way to go. But see, one fundamental is content sells more content, right? So if you're going to just write a book and sit quietly, I don't think anybody can help you sell.
Yeah, that's fair. Ultimately, it is the onus is on the writer to
Yeah,
promote
but how do we make their life
easier.
a little better, right?
Going back to that marketing and distribution question, I agree with you completely. Right now I'm also seeing a lot of authors who have published traditionally with, sort of the biggest international publishers, but the onus of marketing ultimately falls on them because I think publishers are now being selective about how much marketing resources they want to put into what book, right? Like you said, like a Kareena Kapoor book gets all the bells and whistles and all the, huge marketing campaign that say a book that is more niche or, they don't expect to do much sales is not going to get that kind of support in order to publish. But, at the same time, say just the credibility, right? Or say just the basic thing that a publisher might do, which might be put out a press release, right? And then maybe like they get one, two interviews, or they go, they get featured on say Bookstagram or BookTube, or they come on one, two book podcasts. Like we have Books and Beyond, right? So even in that, like a lot of the way that we discover a lot of books is again sort of publishers sharing catalogs or sharing press releases to tell us sort of these books are coming up next. So even that basic network that those authors are able to find to get some kind of visibility, which I think is still lacking for self-published authors. How can self-published authors in a way um, sort of get over that gap or close that gap?
So I think some of the efforts that publishers are putting, uh, I don't agree with them because we've tested it and it doesn't work, right? So I'm not a huge fan of PR with ever dwindling newspapers, and
Yeah.
right. So and again, we've tried Bookstagram. It works for certain kind of books where there is a lot of passion among young bookstagrammers for that topic, right?
Yeah, and
So I
especially
think
fiction, I think. Specific fiction categories.
I think more towards poetry, more towards
Okay.
poetry than and secondary would be fiction. But so like I said, if you have to solve this problem, and how we are doing it currently is in all of our services we help authors define the audience. We help them on how do they define their audience on social. It's very different from your book's audience, but how do you find that audience on social, and then what are the ways in which you can run ads to them, right? So and then there are a lot of campaigns. We do giveaway campaigns. So over the last many years we've realized, we've learned what works, what doesn't work, and I feel we've sort of stayed away from doing things that don't work now anymore.
Okay.
So
What do you think then works, Naveen, for the writers who are listening or watching this podcast? What would you say? Where should they channel their energy in a way when they want to promote the book effectively?
a couple of things, right? So one is a lot of writers, what they do is they spread their marketing across many days. There's a lot of ebbs and flows, right? So I'm thinking from what I've learned from my successful writers, they've all concentrated their marketing efforts in a certain period because then it feels like there is a lot of buzz, right? Second is, the most important problem is that writers think book is for everybody, that their book is for everybody. Have eyes, will read, right? So
Yeah.
it doesn't work that way, because you want the right reader who will give you word of mouth, right? You want the person who will fall in love with it.
Yes, you want that
Right.
specific audience who will
Right.
a book and who will say, this is exactly what I wanted, this is what I needed, so now I love this enough to go around and recommend this to people,
Correct.
tell people similar to me who are the right audience for the book to kind of pick up the book, versus reaching someone who picks it up and then is not the right audience and so doesn't find it useful or finds it not as effective, because then again that's kind of, then they are again spreading the message that okay, this was not as good as I thought it would be, which
Correct. See, one more hack that now it's working, is that, see, if you're writing a book in a specific on a specific topic, right? So find micro and nano influencers who will help you, and that really works, right? Because these big influencers are building audiences that are very general in nature, while the micro and nano influencers are
very
building a
niche
very
audience.
specific niche audience. And if you're able to reach them, and if they promote your book, it really works, right? A general call to action would be for writers to go and explore this trend while it lasts. And that could be the next big thing, right? Because in the US, you see all these book talkers, and the book talk is super big.
Yeah.
It's super big in the US. And it's driven completely by people in these micro niches. So, so if it's a parenting book, find a influencer in the parenting space. Find they would be a passionate mom giving health tips, right? And that would be a great plug for their audience also.
Yeah, because their audience are the people who will find the book relevant. So it makes sense that they would be sort of
Correct.
best people to talk about the book as well. What about bookstores? Because especially physical bookstores like brick and mortar stores, I see a lot of them, still heavily just featuring traditional publishing. Mostly they don't have self-publishing books, so they have that one section at the back somewhere where they will have self-publishing books. So like you said, obviously, one way to go is have print on demand. Mostly self-published books are being sold online rather than in physical bookstores. But I also have authors who want to self-publish, but they want to also be in bookstores. I think it's just that credibility or that dream, right? Of seeing their book in a bookstore and feeling good about it. So if authors want to do that, how can they, get in these bookstores, or how can they get into basically these, what are, I guess, now the mainstream distribution channels to get that visibility?
First of all, isn't Amazon the mainstream distribution channel today? Right?
Yeah, but I agree. But that's what I'm saying. No, a lot of writers still do care about.
No, I understand. I understand that, right?
Amazon is definitely the main distribution channel. I don't know.
See, I have worked with bookstores in the past, right? So pre-COVID, we used to have exclusive display racks for motion trays, right? But see, there are a couple of challenges in this. One is, see, we publish a new book every 17 minutes.
Like a different book, or you mean a copy?
Different, not a copy, different title, right? So every year we publish about 30,000, 35,000 books, right? So now I need book malls to host these stores, host these books. It doesn't work, right? Yeah. So, and also it begs the question, which book has to go to the store and what's relevant for which store? So you also have to think about the audience, right? So just because I want my book written for the cycling community, it's best reached online, right? The cycling community is organized online. Reach them online. Have a call to action where you convert immediately.
Yeah, because there's no specific bookstore where all the cycling community people will gather. Kind of that doesn't work.
Correct. So again, it's not all books. Maybe for very general trade books like fiction, and if it's a very powerful, hard-hitting non-fiction book that the market doesn't have today, then maybe it'll work, right? So again, it's a lot of impulse purchase. So authors need to think about whether my book, end of the day, it's effort, right? Whether I put my investment, effort, time, energy into bookstores, or will it work better online, right? So second is, so I've had bookstores come back to me and give sales reports greater than what I supplied.
Oh, okay.
Right. So operationally, I feel they're not yet up to the mark where we would like to where I can do a lot of writers. I can help them get a lot of interesting books from self-published writers, right? See, because our writers are used to instant reports. When your book sells on Amazon, Notion Press will report it immediately, right? That your book is sold, this is how much you've earned. So I don't think bookstores can aspire to do that at this point. But we are having very promising conversations with some large chains to solve this. But also recently, I think 2 weeks back, we rolled out bookstores. We rolled out bookstore distribution for about 50 of our top selling books that we have high conviction on, right? It's something that we experiment and it's on and off.
Yeah. But I don't even necessarily mean, authors who are publishing with Notion Press. I mean, self-publishing authors, say, who are not going with Notion Press or who are directly uploading their manuscript, say, to Amazon, Kindle Direct Publishing or something like that, who also still want to get into these bookstores. So in a sense, what Notion Press is also doing is providing some kind of infrastructure, right? Where the author themselves is not going and having this conversation at the bookstore. You are doing it for them in the same way that a traditional publisher, in a way, or a distributor would do. But if they have
you get
no
better terms, right? You get better terms.
But if they have no infrastructure at all, whether it's Notion Press or traditional, what can they really do? Like, can an author, I think this is the question that we get. Can I just walk into a bookstore and be like, hey, I published this book. Here are 5 copies. Will you, these copies? And if you sell the copies, then I'll give you more, or whatever it is. Like, can you start that transaction conversation yourself as an author when you don't have that support?
See, bookstores don't like to, they call it account, right? Which I don't want to keep this account with so many people, right? And it's understandable. An account is a relationship that they have to build. There are credit terms, distribution terms, so many factors come into play. And they want a constant supply. They want to rotate cash. All of this biz ops things, they want to be able to do, which is very unlikely for them with an individual, right? So second, if I was an author going and approaching a bookstore, I need to approach the right person. Not everybody in any organization is incentivized to take action.
Yeah.
Right?
Or has the authority to take action.
Or has the authority to take action, right? So I need to go to the right person in a bookstore, probably somebody in merchandising, right? So, and find out if I can provide some data that gives them conviction on this book. So maybe I start my sales online, I build it up, I take it to a level, and then I expand it into physical stores where I can show them the traction I've built on the digital platforms and create some amount of FOMO, right?
Yeah.
Third factor would be if the author is a local, if let's say I'm in Delhi, and I think my first port of call should be Delhi, because bookstores have this bias that local author means he will drive some traffic.
Yeah. I think all of these questions are coming down to this base question, which I think there is this assumption or this criticism that permeates, whether it's traditional publishers, like people working in the industry, or writers, or even to some extent readers, which is, I think, this question of quality, right? Because on one hand, we're saying that, okay, traditional publishing, there's a barrier to entry, and in self-publishing, there isn't. But sometimes what that means is with traditional publishing, because you have an editor working, your script is kind of like your manuscript gets edited multiple times and gets fine-tuned, or you have sort of professional typesetting, you have a professional cover design, and all of these things are happening, which guarantee a certain quality when a book is published. With self-publishing, I think a heavy criticism that we see is there are a lot of books out there which don't have quality, or you can't guarantee when you look at and you go to buy a self-published, okay, it will be well written. Or, sometimes the cover is not professionally designed and so it looks amateur. Like there is this sort of almost visible difference in sometimes what a traditional published book looks like and what a self-published book looks like oftentimes. And I think that is something where a lot of readers feel like not incentivized to buy a self-published book, right? Where they would rather go the traditional way because there is this guarantee.
Yeah. So there are two questions in this, right? So one is from the publisher author perspective, and another one is from the reader perspective, right? See, poor design puts off everybody, whether it's whether it comes from traditional publishing or self-publishing. A subpar product is not the desired outcome, right? See, as writers, we have a huge responsibility to readers. You're not. If you wanted to publish something today, you can go create a blog, Substack. There are so many ways to just put out content, right?
Yeah.
But now, once you take the call that I want to sell this to somebody, then you have to be very conscious that I want to make the best product available and then sell it, right? Especially when your name's going on it. So there is no compromise on quality. We keep educating authors every single day that you can't compromise on quality and expect outcomes.
Yeah.
Right. I'm saying quality problem is not a problem of how you choose to publish. It's a problem of what bar you set for yourself. Right.
Yeah.
The second is from the industry perspective. Right. So I think over the years, it's changed because we talk to authors a lot. So we run a community of about 450,000 writers, and we have a 40 people team who constantly talk to writers. And yeah, I think the people find it more efficient, self-publishing, and people are also now getting used to the fact that, hey, I don't need somebody telling me that my content is good. I don't need that validation. I will go out. See, where self-publishing works really well is if you're thinking like an entrepreneur, right? Self-publishing works really well for folks like that. I work very closely with the industry, with a lot of interesting stakeholders. Sometimes taking help, sometimes giving help on things that they are not able to solve. I have never come across a person at the top who feels this is one versus the other. They all feel it's one leading to the other. You will realize that 8 out of 10 of them have started by self-publishing, right? If my superpower is curation, if my entire business model depends on curating great content and finding great content as a traditional publisher, and if 8 out of top guys in the country at that point have had to self-publish their book to get visibility, then you're clearly not doing something.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. You self-publish first, then get discovered by traditional publishers, and then get picked up. I think with poetry also, Rupi Kaur is the example of that, right? Where I think she also built herself on Instagram, then self-published, and then got up
So
by
you name a
traditional
non-celebrity author who got first picked up by publishers. I mean, non-celebrity top author who first got picked up by publishers, right? That's very rare.
Yeah.
All the top guys had to do it themselves, but one thing in common was they didn't compromise on the quality of. They always thought about this as a product that they are putting out in the market. See, the minute you put a price on it, you have a responsibility.
Yeah.
Right. So very, very interesting times where I think there's a lot of power in the hands of writers to dictate how their book has to be presented, what vision they have, right? And they are all willing to collaborate with us on our understanding of how this book has to be presented, right? See, most of the battles we have are creative battles.
Yeah.
With our authors, right? And upfront, we tell people, boss, this is a creative process. It's going to be a little difficult. You will have ideas, we'll have ideas, we'll work it out, right? So I think that's how good products are bought. And that brings me back to the first thing that we spoke about. How do you balance tech and arts?
Yeah. What about, resources or just like purely money, right? Because for self-published authors, say to guarantee a certain amount of quality, sometimes they do have to, because that is one thing with traditional publishing, right? Which is that once you sign a contract, sure, you're getting less royalties, you're getting less return on the sales of the books. But also the idea is that publisher is paying to get book edited. Like it's a publisher's money, right? Which is getting the book edited, getting it typeset, getting the cover design, getting the printing done. And that's why you're getting less royalties. Now here, because the onus falls on the author in terms of, with these systems as well, doesn't that make it more difficult for authors to ensure high quality and be able to get the book out, where they have to shell a certain amount of money? Because then I think it again becomes a either or, right? Like either I compromise on quality, or I have this much money to spend immediately to be able to get the best version of the book out and to be able to publish it, and hope that I'll be able to recoup that money or make even more money with the sales of the book.
See, like everything in life and business, right? So, see, unfortunately, we have this thing where if you're a writer, you're poor, right? So we still
The
have
poor
that.
artist.
Yeah, we have that thing in our head, right? See, we have. So imagine before we started Notion Press, a writer would have to invest a couple of lakhs into printing and a lot of money and energy into finding resources, right? So we've solved all of that, right? Today, we also have a tech platform where you can do it yourself for free. You can design a good quality book. You can design, you can edit your book, and all of this is free as a tool, right? But it's sort of like an evolution. It cannot happen overnight. As more writers support us, we are incentivized more to work towards helping writers bring that quality barrier down. But for writers who invest today, the quality is extremely high, right? Because one of the biggest convictions that we have is a very small percentage of people get a publishing contract with a publisher. But even without a publishing contract, right? So the benchmark is, if I were to put my name on a book and I'm willing to spend that money, would I get top quality? What we're trying to achieve is how do you bring the price barrier down? How do you make it more and more affordable so that more writers can build their publishing businesses and publish a high quality book, right? But we are still a 10-year-old company battling a 400-year-old industry, right?
What do you think about prizes? Like literary prizes, awards, these kinds of platforms where authors are given recognition, or sort of some kind of reward, which again, most of these platforms only look at traditionally published books. Do you have an opinion on this? Should self-published books be included, or do you think it doesn't matter at all to self-publish books?
See, personally, I would say don't include, because I don't want my writers to be corrupted by vanity, right? I want them to think very straight on what my goal is. No, so no. But that aside, I'll tell you there are two things in this, right? So, see, there are real, very well curated, well organized awards, and I think they are extremely important that we recognize writers. But that award also leads to so many scams, right? So there are so many scam awards that are happening that we constantly keep getting emails saying Midnight Novel Award. You pay 5,000,
And
right?
you get an award, yeah.
Yeah, and we have to send a response saying, please don't do this. Uh, it's not necessary for you to promote. It's not going to help you, right? So
Yeah, there's so much work then additionally you are doing to just educate the authors to tell them don't fall for these scams.
correct. So see, once you bring this awards culture, then very organically it leads to a kind of a scam culture, right? So which is what we're trying to avoid, trying to educate users on. And my wish is that we would have uh, an indie author award to recognize independent writers, but it shouldn't be again run like how these awards are run with the closed room. I don't know who's judging. I don't know how it happens, right? Uh, I
Yeah.
think when we do it, it will be a lot more transparent. And what is the whole point of bringing awards without involving readers,
Yeah, that's fair. But if a
right?
Notion Press book tomorrow got, say, shortlisted for a JCB prize, that will still be a huge credibility
See,
point
it will be
for that
credibility for
author.
all of us, right? So, see,
Yeah.
like I said, I'm not against these well-run awards, but there are 4 or 5 of them, and there are some
Yeah.
400 scams, right? So
Yeah.
I'm very scared to tell writers about awards because
To encourage writers to
uh,
aim for awards or to try to get awards in case they fall for the
correct.
scams. Going back to, because you have explained so much of Notion Press's model today, which honestly, I also didn't know a lot of these things. I think the last time I really properly checked out Notion Press was 3-4 years ago, because I'm also a writer. So at some point I had looked at it as, a platform. And I think there's been a lot of development over the years that I also didn't know. But with all of these things that you're telling me about, how a lot of writers can do these things for free, design their book for free, what is your business model then? Like how is Notion Press sustaining itself to be able to offer writers all of these things?
So very small percentage of our revenue, I would say roughly about 15 percentage today is from services that we offer, right? Everything else is from sale of books.
Okay.
So we co-monetize with writers. So writers get 70% of the profits and we get 30% of the profits.
Okay. That makes sense. So it's the opposite, in a way, flips the traditional publishing thing where writers usually get less than 30% even.
Yeah. So also our model is completely where the writer has a non-exclusive arrangement with us, which means they can publish with us and with somebody in some other format or in the same format at the same time.
Okay. So you just make money off of the copies that are getting sold in copies that they are publishing with you in that
With
particular
us.
format.
Correct.
So that sounds very interesting. Okay, going away from Notion Press for a quick second. What do you like to read? You, Naveen, as an individual.
Uh, off late, a lot of readings have been just reports, right? So no, but I try to read one book every weekend, right? So weekends are for reading, and my personal favorite is uh, business biographies, right? So
Okay.
I love business biographies, especially the ones that are told well. The most recent one I read was about Trader Joe's, right? And very interesting. So uh, every time I see a business biography, I buy it, I hold it, and then when its turn comes, I read it.
How many books do you still have pending to read?
Hundreds.
And
It's my retirement plan.
it's your retirement plan is to keep reading these, holding these books to read.
Yeah,
Then you will read more often once you retire.
maybe, right?
Yeah. And what if you had to give sort of one advice to writers who are today trying to figure out should they go traditional or self-publishing, what approach should they choose? What do you think should be the sort of decision-making factor that they should think about?
See, I think for different purposes, different things work, right? But as a first-time writer, your starting point should not even be publishing. Your starting point should be to be known as a writer for that audience. So start writing online, building your audience online. I think that is more important. And whether you choose self-publishing or traditional publishing, uh, that audience that you build is what is going to affect everything else, right? Having said that, I think uh, to choose or one against the other is, see, if you get a contract with a good publisher in India, go for it, but go for it knowing that there would be a celebrity book in their pipeline and your marketing would get completely sidetracked, right?
Yeah.
I have a lot of writers who've come back from who published their book with one of the large publishers, and they felt like at that time they were promoting this one book, and then entire attention went. And nothing against that, but it's the nature of the business, right?
Yeah.
See, there you need one or two big outcomes for your business to be sustainable in traditional publishing, and they will always play for that outcome. If your bad luck, you end up with in the similar time period where a Sachin Tendulkar's book comes out, forget about promotions, you won't even get email responses back.
Yeah.
Right? So, but go fully knowing that this is the game, right, that you're playing. On the other side, if you're very entrepreneurial and you feel you want to control this, your outcomes better, go gravitate towards self-publishing because the deals are better, the outcomes are better. But don't drop the quality bar thinking that you just have to publish and it'll sell.
Yeah.
You need to still build a product that people will want to have, right? So yeah, I think and either ways, if you're successful in one and you're known as a writer, then the choice is yours, right? So as a Stephen King today, I would decide how I want to put my book out.
Yeah.
Right. So if you want to optimize for your outcome, make sure that whichever path you choose, you understand which game you're playing.
I think that's really great advice for writers everywhere. And to sort of figure out what their writing journey will be. So right now, what does your day-to-day look like as the CEO of Notion Press?
Wow.
What do you do on a day-to-day basis?
Okay. So it's a sad story, right? Today my day started at 2 a.m. right? Usually it starts at 3 a.m. right? So I work for a bit on product ideas that I have. So 3 to 5 is my time where I work on product ideas, right? And 5 to 6 is workout, swim. I'm trying to get a little fit, right? And by 6:30, I'm out of the house. By 7, I'm in office. After that, it would just be endless meetings, aligning people to goals. So there are days when there are 15 meetings. There are days where there are 17 of them, right? So,
yeah,
which is why I wake up so early to finish all the stuff that I want to work on. And then just by 2 o'clock, I'm a zombie, right? So my team knows that only poor decisions you will get from this man. So
I'm so happy we're not doing this after 2 then. Doing it in the morning.
Yeah. So at 2 o'clock-ish, I think I'm completely drained out and I'm just waiting for the day to close. By 5:30, I go back home.
At least it's 5:30. I was assuming when you started with like 2 a.m., 3 a.m., I thought that even the end of the day would be really late.
No, I see. I don't see a point in. So I have this thing where my body rhythm is like I'm fresh in the morning as soon as I wake up, right? I'm super fresh, and then it goes down. For a lot of people, they're groggy through the day, and then at night they get some energy boost, right? I don't know how they do that, but I'm not one of those people. So I plan it so that my most mentally challenging things would be at the beginning of the day, and then slowly it will taper towards things that don't require as much attention.
Yeah. No, I totally understand. I also am like at my productive best at 6 a.m. for no reason. I have
Mm.
nothing to do, but it's just like the mind is so active at that point. So
You know, right? Yeah, I get that feeling that that's my time when there's nobody.
yeah. Where are you seeing the industry, publishing as a whole or self-publishing headed, say, 5 years down the line? Like, where do you think we should be at, and what publishing should look at that point, ideally?
See, publishing will look like the way it is today, uh,
I
just with
specified ideally.
just just with less power in the hands of publishers. My personal big battle is to make sure that the power shift that happens from publishers do not go into the hands of intermediaries, platforms, right? And instead goes back into the hands of writers.
Hmm.
Middleman platform like Amazon. See, I love Amazon as a consumer, as a customer, right?
Yeah.
But they have more power than a publisher,
Yes.
right? Who has more power than an author, right? So the shift is happening, but the unhealthy shift that's happening is more and more power is accruing in the hands of the middlemen, and without any incremental value addition, they get a lot of power, right? So even you take digital platforms, uh, let's take Spotify for music, or let's take platforms like Wattpad, right? They have so much data, they're so powerful, but still their business model is leaning more towards, now that it's evolved, it's leaning more towards the top 1%, right? Or the top 1% musician makes far more than everybody else, right? So eventually what happens is everybody gives up content for free, just for the privilege of being there,
Hoping
right?
to be in that top 1%.
Hoping to be in the top 1%, right? So so my wish is that uh, this shift that's happening shifts towards writers and the creative people who are, see, I don't mean writers as a standalone. I mean writers, editors, all the creatives who are involved, right? And collectively, I think they have to be more powerful to be able to control their story, right? Than let's say a publisher or a supply chain partner. So, so that's one thing. The second thing is that uh, there will be a lot of cross uh, format content flow, right? So, like I said, books to courses. So you have, as an author, you have a book, you bring in a reader. Can you convert him into also buying your course? Can you then build a consulting business on top of it, right? So I think that we're super primed for that. See, that requires a very evolved ecosystem, right? And a very educated uh, authors who are, when I say educated, I mean about how content businesses work, right? So, and that's happening now. The kind of writers that I'm talking to, I'm meeting, and they're all leaning towards how do I build my business on top of content. So that's going to happen. That shift is going to happen very squarely, very quickly. So as a company, we want to be there when that happens.
No, that's a great point. Both of the points that you actually mentioned, for sure, that seems to be where the industry should be headed towards, which is, power with the individuals, with people being able to monetize book not just as a book, but also then monetize it based on, their knowledge, the book as sort of almost a product, so can we treat it like a product? Another thing I would ask you is, where do you see the industry headed in terms of currently what is happening, which is these blurring the lines between different formats, right? Like a book as a printed sort of, or like a only written thing versus, an audiobook or a podcast. So the written format versus audio format versus uh like screen, like video formats, or even, there's this sort of, because of episodic books coming out, there is sort of this blurring of the lines between what is a newsletter and what is a book. And like authors also able to make those kind of decisions, right? Like if I have knowledge and I want to put it out, should I write it as a newsletter or should I write it as a book? So how do you see these current sort of integrations that are happening playing out in the future?
I think at a much more accelerated rate, uh, primarily because the cost of content creation is going to go down drastically, right? So let's say you're a writer who's written long form content, and now you want to convert it into audio, or you want to convert it into video. It's going to the cost is going to go down, so it's going to go near close to zero, right? And as that happens, you will see the content explosion happening.
Yeah.
Then new problems will emerge of curation. How do you curate this? How does people discover this, right? So yeah, I'm very excited about the fact that so many stories out there can be made into movies or web series, right? So, but also outside of again, I would say those are traditional channels, right? Outside of that, can you have, like, the how it's happening in China, right? Can you have YouTube series, more democratized, and can that go, and can this book be told on YouTube as different videos serialized inside a playlist, and can that go and generate enough views? Right? So there are so many interesting ways. I think we're lucky to be alive in this time where these sweeping things that usually take a year happens in a compressed time, right? So it's about how we keep up and position ourselves.
No, absolutely, because that's one thing that we are also really excited about, because that is also the space Bound is in, right? Which is how these formats are blurring and how these different things are sort of happening and how these power balances are shifting. So definitely, I think, this repeated conversation which comes up every year, which is like, oh, our book's dying, and is, the industry ending, and now it's like, oh, is AI gonna kill all like creative industries, and like all writers are going to lose jobs? That sort of doomsday kind of conversation that almost happens on a yearly basis. It's so interesting to see that that conversation is still ongoing while all of these interesting new avenues are opening up at the same time, and all of these opportunities are coming. So that balance.
I think you hear these conversations all the time, right? So and and it's going to be there forever. But see, the fundamental is, if you don't adapt, you perish, right? So if you don't adapt, you get outdated, and business models will change, formats will change, but the need to have great content, that is fundamental, right? And we look at book as a form factor. You had flip phones, you have smartphones. These are all different form factors, right? So so there is no sanctity about the form factor. You never go and say, oh, the flip phone, how can you say that about a flip phone? It's so sacred. Right? So whether it's a digital platform, whether it's video format, whatever format, great stories are always going to be told, right? Today we are all lucky that a 400, 500-year-old format is still surviving, and it's still growing, right? We're lucky that that's happening today, but you can't count on it, right? So you need to give some credit to the skeptics also. You can't, as a large business in publishing, you can't just close your eyes and say no, this won't affect me. It's not done in the past 400 years. This won't affect me.
Yeah.
I think you should probably say, hey, here's this amazing opportunity. How do I take advantage of that? Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So one interesting side note is that we're working with this generative AI, right? And so now we are all of the age where we have kids. When we started out, we were kids, right? So, and the minute this generative AI came in, our team over a weekend, they got into a hackathon. They wanted to build something. And the first thing they wanted to build was, my kids are not reading. They're just on YouTube. Can we do a book where it's hyper personalized, right? Where the kid is illustrated into the story.
Oh.
So we're launching that this Friday, right? So if you have a child and our AI will learn how your child looks and then illustrate weave your child into the story and across the story, right? So
that is so cool.
Yeah. So
is this
again,
this is on YouTube?
No. This is as a physical book.
Okay, so you buy the book and the physical copy that you get will have your child as the main character.
Your child,
your
correct.
child's likeness as the main character in the physical copy.
Yeah. Earlier, it used to be just the names you could customize and all that, and you called it personalization. Yeah. But now you can actually customize the character, and it would be, so let's say your child as a fire marshal or your child as a cop, right? So it would be your child and your child's journey in the story. So we're launching it this Friday. It's got nothing to do with the core business, but again, as a fun project, we wanted to do.
Yeah. It's just innovation, right? It's something new in how we are personalizing these stories. A growth in terms of, what we are looking at as storytelling, right? Because again, I think perception of books is something which is very stagnant, which is like, okay, once it's written, and then it is just this fixed thing, like this very immovable, unchangeable object that exists. And just to, I think, create this variation where, there can be all of these changes in the book itself and in the way that a book looks, I think can be very interesting for children, definitely, to get them to read. So
I think it's just two engineers who are solving their own problems, right? And looking at it like, hey, my kids are not reading, they're all the time on YouTube, how do I solve this? Yeah. Right? So, and then so I think as businesses, if we adapt these changes, and see, you have two ways. You can say, this is not our business. Or you can say, what's the worst that's going to come out of it? We'll have a lot of fun, but let's learn how this works. And as a business, if you adapt it, I think it's better for everybody in the long run. And eventually, if we are able to bring more kids to become better readers, right? It's good for the industry as a whole.
Have you ever considered writing a book?
A lot of times.
What book would you write?
On how would you write and publish a book?
Like a how to publish, how to self-publish kind of manual.
Okay. How to publish?
How to publish. Nice. Alternate career. If you were not doing this, what would you want to do? And you cannot say aerospace engineer or cyber.
No, I'm not going to be an aerospace engineer, right? Yeah, I love the hospitality industry, right? So I'm dabbling in some experiments there. So as an alternate career, I think either I would be a hydroponic farmer.
Okay.
Or I would be brewing beer, right?
Brewing beer, nice.
Yeah. So actually, I
very specific niche things.
Yeah.
Love it.
It's again sort of brew beer, read great books, sort of my retirement plan, right?
Maybe this is your retirement alternate career when you'll be reading those business books that you're holding right now.
And having a beer.
Yeah. Okay. if you were on a deserted island and you could only carry one book, let's say one self-published book for the sake of this, what book would it be?
See, there is this book by Guy Kawasaki, right? It's called Ape, author, publisher, entrepreneur, right? So he self-published the book, and I think that's a book that I keep going back to remember our thought process when we started, right? So I think that would be the book.
Okay. What is one surprising thing that very few people know about you in your public persona?
A lot of people don't know that I'm an introvert, right? So as in on social media, I hate going on social.
Yeah.
So a lot of people believe that, see, I like in-person conversations, right? But they assume that, hey, this person must have a lot of content on social. He must be writing, right? And then they go and see that I don't do anything online. So I have had people come back and say, why don't you do more social?
Yeah, like you should post more, you should gain a following, that kind of things.
Correct. I think that doesn't work for me. This introvert engineer kind of thing works better for me.
Yeah, because when you said introvert, I was like, that should not be a surprise. With engineer and with, most people who work with books tend to be introverted. It's very rare for people to be very, very extroverted in their personalities.
See, in Notion Press, how it works is my co-founder is a better engineer. So he's a tech guy, right? So he handles tech, right? So I handle the public facing side of the business. So when people realize that I am not so public, I'm a super private person, despite the fact that in a in-person conversation, it's not as bad, right? So that's sort of like a surprise to a lot of people.
That's fair. No, in this conversation, I couldn't tell that you were an introvert at all.
Yeah.
But that's great. So, Naveen, that's the end of this conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the Book People, for answering all of these questions. I think this was one of the best conversations I've had so far on this podcast. Thank you so much for this.
Thanks, Aishwarya. And wish you the best for Bound. And hopefully we'll work together someday.
Yes, that would be amazing.
Right? So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for your time.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see all of these new things that you've been telling me that Notion Press is doing. So I will check them out for sure.
Don't follow me on social. I won't even post about it. my team.
Follow you. Just see what Notion Press is doing with all of
I'm telling you, if you want that update, my team will post it.
Okay.
Right? Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. That marks the end of another episode of The Book People. Tune in every Thursday for some breakdowns, some truth bombs, and some insightful and real conversations with industry experts about all things books. This podcast is created by Bound. We work with writers and brands to create content across formats, whether it's books, podcasts, newsletters, or screenplays. So get in touch to see how we can help you grow through stories. And follow us at Bound India on all social media platforms. I'm your host, Aishwarya Javalgekar. You can follow me on LinkedIn, where I share many more insights about books and content. Or you can get in touch with me at aishwarya@boundindia.com if you have any suggestions on topics I should cover, or if you want to book any of my services or consultation calls. Until then, keep writing.